Hello, Hall County. We're here in the West Hall High School Learning Commons to talk to you today a little bit about how to make smooth transitions from the virtual classroom to the at-home classroom. My name is Adam Johnson, and I teach English here at West Hall. I teach AP Language, IB English A, another IB class, and Honors World Lit and British Literature. And this is
Julie Pritchard, and I teach math. I teach IB Math Analysis, Year 1 and Year 2. I teach Honors Geometry and Accelerated 2.
And we are voted the class of 2020's toughest teachers here at West Hall. So we thought we might talk a little bit about making that smooth transition and still keeping that rigor that you want to keep. The big concept for today is that students should be able to see and tell the similarities between your virtual classroom and your in-person classroom, because they should be consistent and they should match whether you're at home or in school. Okay? And we have 4 basic ideas for success. The first one is to start with Maslow's and then move into Bloom's. When I was in undergraduate education all those years ago, I scoffed at the idea that students weren't going to care how much we knew until they knew how much we cared. But this past spring really made that evident, didn't it, Julie?
It did.
And so, yeah.
So we need to really get a clear picture of what's happening at home, and we want to do that within the first few weeks of school. And then still understanding that things change so quick in our students' life. It did this past spring, and it is bound to continue to change this fall.
And so one of the tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that we can get a real picture at home is Google Surveys. This is an old question that I used to ask, and that was for them to check all that applied, whether they had reliable high-speed network, whether they had their own computer, or whether they had a family computer. But that didn't really tell the whole picture, and it didn't give me enough information to figure out kind of what was going on technologically at home. So this year, we have worked hard at West Hall to kind of tailor the questions to get the real information that we need. For example, how would you rate the strength of your home network, Wi-Fi, etc.? And then I added this little description. If you can stream Netflix or Disney Plus on your network, it is at least a 3. This is because I found that students had very different ideas of what a reliable or strong home network was when 3 of their siblings were all streaming Netflix and they were playing video games at the same time and experiencing lag. That's a pretty good network. And then the reliability of their home network, again, rating that on a scale of very weak to very strong. And then where students are most likely to find Wi-Fi or internet access if it goes out at home. Why do you think this is important, Ms. Pritchard?
Well, it's important because we had students going to South Carolina to stay with grandparents just to get Wi-Fi access.
Wow.
Sometimes they hit up at McDonald's or Starbucks. There could be anywhere they're trying to find it if they don't have it at home, and we need to know those things.
Very true, especially as it becomes time for deadlines and for work to be turned in. We want to hold them to the standard that the technology will support. Other questions that I intend to ask this year for students is what are some of the obstacles that they faced in the spring, and whether they anticipate these obstacles to be the same this year. This will help us kind of gauge how school from home went last year and how much has changed or not changed at home for them. Again, putting students as people first before they're students and deadline meeters and paper writers and equation solvers and all of that. Seeing them as people first is really is the most important thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Some issues that we faced in the spring were that a lot of our older siblings were watching their younger siblings. So as teachers, a lot of us got a little frustrated because emails were coming in at midnight, but the deal was a lot of them were helping their younger siblings at home work through all of their homework before the teenagers got to start on their work. So we need to be aware of things like that. Also, we found out in the spring that a lot of the parents were losing jobs or laid off, and that students were having to supplement their parents' income more than usual. I had a senior that was working 60 hours a week to try to provide food and help pay the rent.
Along those lines, we found that social workers were delivering basics like toiletries, like shampoo and conditioner, things like that, soap, and so that really affects a student's ability to focus on their schoolwork if they're wondering, if they're going to be able to bathe and keep sort of that general level of humanity across days and school days. Also, we know that isolation leads to mental health issues, especially if students are already facing those and then they go home and are isolated. Those mental health issues can become much more easily exacerbated. And then here are some just examples of other things that our students faced. Bed bugs will stick with me for the rest of my career. That we had a student in the spring battling bed bugs, trying to focus on schoolwork. Sleep deprivation is a reality. And these are things that are affecting their physical health, and so obviously those are going to influence their presence on your Zooms, their ability to complete classwork. And if we're striving to be the most caring place on earth, which we are, these are things that we need to keep in mind as we are interacting with students, contacting them, reaching out and seeing how they're doing and what's going on. Okay, so we think it's great to care. Obviously, we wouldn't be teachers if we didn't care, but we need to know how to care, and we need to know what it is that is specifically going on in our students' lives, so that we can care specifically. I think is a great phrase. All right, you want to talk a little bit about organization?
Sure. The second key is organization. Organization is key. So there are a couple of ways to get organized, and you really need to kind of figure out what works for you. Some people in our building loved sending out weekly announcements.
This was my strategy going into the spring. I used the announcements this way, and for each of my classes, they got an announcement that updated each class period. So it had Zoom links, had an agenda for what we were going to do on Zoom, had links to an assignments, and then down at the bottom I put when I updated it down to the minute. So if I was up at 6:46 a.m. on April 30th, as I was for this particular announcement, I wanted them to know that if they got up at 7:30 or 8:30 or 2:30 in the afternoon, this is as updated as it needed to be for that day's set of assignments. Okay.
The second example is dated modules. This is something I've been doing for a couple of years. Students learn from day one to go to their modules, and when they do, it will be there'll be a text header that tells them what week they are in, and then the day that we are on, that's what they click on. When you click on that link, it'll give them the full lesson plan, videos, homework, and then of course tells them the Zoom links and the times of the Zooms.
A third way is to use a home page in your course that makes a lot of sense and is well organized and easy to navigate. This has, you can see links to relevant information. It has a link down at the bottom to the weekly schedule, and the weekly schedule page then has a daily breakdown. This doesn't have to be the most graphically amazing thing that you've ever created. The key here is to organize the work so that students can consistently find it, whether they are in your classroom or at home trying to figure things out and juggle all of the things potentially that we talked about in the previous key to success.
The last thing is we want to make sure that it's parent-friendly language. Parents don't necessarily know what modules are. They know what assignments mean, they know what a to-do list means. They may not even necessarily know what Zoom means. And so we really want parents engaged and active with us, co-teaching with us, since remote learning has a lot to do with them helping us out. So we want to make sure that the language on our pages and on our Canvas are very parent-friendly, that they understand when they read it.
I think that's a great key. And so to choose a method that makes sense for you is the right way to go, and then to be consistent across your classes and across the time, whether you're in person or at home. The third key is to use Remind effectively. The district has very generously given us access to Remind Pro, or whatever Remind calls it, and so rosters are in, and here are a few ways that we used Remind effectively in the spring. Links to Canvas and links to Zoom. Links to Canvas are very helpful because the Remind messages are character limited, like text messages are, but it'll carry a link to the announcement that a student can open right on their phone, and a link to a Zoom. So for example, if you are a few students short at the beginning of your Zoom and you want to just reach out and use Remind that way to increase engagement, then sending that link to a student's phone, they can open it right up wherever they are and join the Zoom. And then individual check-ins, and it really, again, going back to using that parent-friendly language, it increases parent communication because parents can sign up for Reminds as well.
Yes.
Allowing replies to your message and setting office hours are key settings in Remind, because while the office hours do not prevent students from messaging you, it does allow them to see that you might not get an immediate response to the question, or a solution to the problem that they're facing. This is an example of a link to Canvas that I sent out in Remind to my AP Language student. Pretty easy. We're going to have a Zoom at 9:15. Here's a link that has some more information and the Zoom link and all that. And this, in my mind, is an added layer of security for the Zooms, because they have to log into Canvas to get the Zoom information. Okay, so keep Remind messages short and informative, increase student performance, and increase parent engagement, or at least the likelihood of that participation. All right, let's talk about the deadline dance.
Yikes.
Oh, the deadline dance. One of the things that got me voted toughest teacher is that deadlines are deadlines are deadlines, and they are set at the beginning of the assignment, and they are enforced at the end of the assignment. Mm-hmm. But can you talk a little bit about the difference between a due date and available until date in Canvas?
Sure. So when you set up assignments in Canvas, you have the option of stating when the due date is. The date that you put in for the due date will be the date they see on their calendar. Many students look for their assignments using the calendar, so it's really important as a way of communicating that we set those due dates so that kids know exactly when things are due. The available till means that the students will no longer be able to access that assignment at that particular date. In the spring, we ended up leaving those open, especially with kids turning in stuff maybe 4 weeks late because they were just trying to get their self together. However, the due date is what is important. Once the due date is there and kids turn things in, you'll be able to see if it was past the date and the time that you set. So those are very helpful.
Also, is due dates that show up on the Canvas calendar, so that when students see that something is due, it's going to show up with all of the other work that's due on the calendar feature in Canvas. I want to talk a little bit about the Infinite Campus gradebook. I use some of these, and Ms. Pritchard uses some of these. In my gradebook, I use M's and 1s for assignments that were either missing, or let's say a student took a quiz and didn't get any of the answers right, then I'm going to put a 1 in there just to know that that they at least attempted the quiz, and that communicates to me and the student and the parent that that's what happened. And M also communicates that the assignment just wasn't turned in. Both of these pretty much mathematically calculate the same way, but again, it's about the communication to the parent through the gradebook. That's another layer of support that we can provide the student, really, because if the teacher and the parent are on the same page, then we know how to engage the student and try to get them back on track in class.
Yeah, one of the things we highly figured out in the spring is that missings are really important. A lot of times when you leave things blank, students and parents alike think that that assignment just wasn't for that student. When they see the missing, parents say, oh, wait a minute, my child was supposed to do that and didn't. And so you gain more parental support if they understand what it means and they understand what missing means. Students a lot of times will also wait for that missing because they usually understand by now a missing calculates as a 0. If you leave it blank, they think that you're going to forget about it. So we suggest not leaving any blanks in your Infinite Campus.
That's right. And then considering the 25, 50, 75, 100 sort of point values for completion grades on discussion posts and things like that. Very helpful, again, using the grade book to communicate to parents. Okay. That also sets clear expectations for students, and that helps define then a clear path to success. Now, whether the student takes that path to success is entirely up to that student, and we certainly don't want to say that just because we have these expectations that students are going to meet them. We all know that that's not the case. Okay. If you have any other further questions or comments about some of the things that we talked about today, feel free to email us. I'm adam.johnson@hallco.org.
I'm julie.pritchard@hallco.org.
And we are happy to help in any way that we can. Thank you for joining us today, and have
Best
a great
wishes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good luck.
have a great
Best
school
wishes.
year.